I'm Cole Haddon, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk. Today's guest is an Australian musician whose career I've been following since I first interviewed him in a Detroit club 20 years ago. I'm talking about Ben Lee here, and we're about to discuss his music, the death of the American myth, and our complicated relationships with the country we once called home.
I feel like there are songs that capture the spirit of what's happening, but it's almost like you can't hit it too on the nose. And I thought, well, that is sort of the privilege of where I'm standing now. I thought I should do this.
Welcome back, Story Talkers. 20 years ago, I was a freelance journalist still trying to work out how to do my job. I'd literally made up a resume that claimed I knew what I was doing, credits and all. But I'd written only a handful of articles when I was told to sit down with this Aussie musician, Ben Lee, whose new album, Awake is the New Sleep, I'd brought up to an editor. This was in Detroit at the Magic Stick, and I think the interview was a complete dumpster fire. My recollection is Ben thought I was an idiot, which I think would have been a fair assessment of my skills as a journalist by that point. In the years since, I've continued to track his career, always keen to find out what new music he was putting out into the world. His work is fun and poppy, but also poetical and layered and often spiritual. Sometimes it's even political. This year, he released what I think it's fair to say is his most political song yet, The Fall of America, which you'll get to listen to today. It's a lament for the death of the American myth that once inspired him to move to the country. He spent more than a quarter century there, married an American, actress Ione Skye, maybe most famously known for starring in the film Say Anything. His kid and stepkid are both American too. Now, when I first heard this new song from him, I cried. But I cried even harder the second time I listened to it because that time I played it for my 11-year-old as a way to try to help him understand what I was feeling, watching the country I was born into burn down in real time. I then sent the song to my friend, musician Carrie Brothers, whom I knew was friends with Ben. "Have you heard this song yet?" I texted him. By the way, Carrie is the musician behind this podcast's music. He's brilliant, and you should check out his work immediately in the show notes, where of course you'll find links to Ben's work and The Fall of America too. I asked Carrie to make an introduction to Ben for me, and 30 minutes later, Ben agreed to join me as a guest on 5 a.m. Story Talk. This was a last-minute addition to my curation, I should point out. I wanted to talk about The Fall of America so much, I rearranged my entire publishing schedule just to fit this episode in. But I'm glad I did, because Ben and I had an amazing, sometimes very moving conversation about finding ourselves in Los Angeles. The 20th anniversary of Awake is the New Sleep and how we've changed since its release. And the surreal experience of watching something you invested so much in, a place so many people we love still call home, die on our phones' screens. What you're about to listen to is political, yes, and I know that can be off-putting for some trying to run away from the P word these days, but I think Ben's perspective here is valuable. Art helps us dream. It's a promise in some way. And the promise of America, for artists not born there, is unparalleled, or at least it was. Something has changed for those outside the country. It's hard to dream about a place if you feel unsafe even talking about what's happening there. As you'll hear, Ben wasn't even sure if he should share the fall of America with the world. It might put his family at risk. What a terrible place for artists to find themselves. Now, before Ben and I dive into our chat, two quick things. The first, when this episode wraps up, you're going to want to stick around. That's because I'm going to tell you how to listen to my bonus ep with Ben. He returns to discuss a foundational piece of art from his life, the short story, The Balloon by Donald Barthelme, which you'll find a link to in the show notes. That other quick thing, if you enjoy this episode from 5 a.m. Story Talk, be sure to subscribe so this podcast keeps showing up in your life. All right, are you ready to get into today's episode with me? Let me introduce you to musician Ben Lee. Oh, welcome, Ben. It's so great to see you. How's the apocalypse treating you this week?
Yeah, today is a good day. That's, and we're looking at micro victories.
What's the latest micro victory in your life?
Well, we've just moved houses, and our daughter started the public school in this area. So today's actually her first day, and she's texting, going, things are going pretty well. So that's good. And I don't know, all those things like life. It's funny because our daughter's 16 she's just beginning to get a sense of, like, I had to get her app so she can have a digital driver's license on the phone
Mm,
because, and her own Medicare and all those things. And she's like, God, being an adult is so much like, bureaucracy, like so much housekeeping, admin.
yeah.
And it's a lot of that kind of stuff that when you get through it, you're like, okay, we're doing all right.
Well, congrats on the move. I hope it went well.
Cheers. Yes.
So diving in, I want to ask about Ryan Adams' recent comments about how the best Aussies can ever do is just copy American and British culture. I know he's apologized for what he said, so we don't need to talk about that. But in there's, I think, a kernel of truth about how people think about Australia outside the country, and even how I find a lot of Aussie artists still think and talk about the art produced here. So I'm curious, how would you have felt as an Aussie about those comments in 1995, around the time that Noise Addict broke up? And how do you feel about them today?
Hmm. In some ways, I might have agreed more. I remember a few years ago, Azealia Banks had a similar kind of outburst after she got ripped off by some promoters here or something. And she went, her tirades, they come with the same frequency as Ryan Adams, and you need to be taken with the same grain of salt. But what I thought was really interesting about that analysis, like that lens of looking at culture and art, is that it's actually cultural criticism made through an American cultural imperialist lens, right? So meaning that artistic success, cultural success, let alone business, it's measured in terms of athleticism and competitiveness with the rest of the world. Now, there's something to that, there's something to the toppermost of the poppermost, great things on an international level are very powerful, and they obviously, whether it's the Beatles or, I just heard this new Rosalia song with Björk that came out today that I'm just like, the whole world, everyone's just like, whoa, it's in German and then it's in Spanish, and like international connection is really important. But one of the things I've come to realize, and this is probably more in the last decade, is that some of the metrics by which we can measure success they're not all about contributions to the GDP. You know what I mean? They're about community. They're about quality of life and experience and artistic connections between people and stuff. And I guess what I'm saying is that I would sort of agree. Like the premise of Ryan Adams's critique is that there's a lack of dog eat dog. Liam Gallagher said the same thing. Liam Gallagher said the weather's too good. Your bands are never going to be good enough because why would you start a band when you can be on the beach looking at chicks? That was what Liam Gallagher said. And so there is a truth to all of these criticisms that the quality of life and the laid back culture do prevent the development of a certain kind of like capitalist hunger by which people want to do anything to like beat the next guy and become the best and get to the top. But I'm not sure that's the only way of measuring the quality of culture. So I think two things can be true at the same time. Like there is a truth to the lack of competitive success that Australia has had in music to a degree. Less so with acting, interestingly. Actors have taken the world stage much more. But I'm becoming increasingly skeptical of the metrics that particularly Americans use to measure impact, right? Like I look at, and obviously this is, a big part of what we're going to talk about today, but I look at what I was attracted to about America and about the, that whole Oprah culture of you can be anything you want, you can have anything you want. That's the American dream. What a beautiful thing. Yet, here we are. And look at what it has produced. So is that metric a reliable metric on which to build a culture? So all of this stuff is sort of going around in my mind increasingly over the last decade.
It's been happening to me too. Where is happiness in the creative process and success outside of Australia, I would constantly run into people who didn't know about Aussie artists who were doing incredibly well for themselves in Australia. And I'd always think, I wish I had that career and I could just enjoy making my art. And, maybe you don't have to be Kylie Minogue. Maybe you don't need to be that big to have a good, meaningful life and to find joy, I guess, in your art.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really classic question for artists, like how much is the right amount of attention and validation? Because really, if you are going for the top, it radically infringes the kind of freedoms that you have. And I've been close enough to fame at different levels to get a good sense of like what I'm actually looking for.
Mm.
And I realized some time ago that the respect of my peers was a much more important barometer than the respect of the general public. Not that I don't like the general public, and I love when people come up to me, normal people, and they share their stories, but I don't chase it. And for me, that puts me in a certain space where I have a lot of freedom in my life. Like I can support myself and my family with my music, which is actually increasingly rare. There's so few artists that can do that without the horror show of celebrity in a way that it really affects my life. People like, especially in Australia and where I live, like people like, hey, yes, I'm walking down the street. Some guy goes, cigarettes will kill you, like change my life. Like those kind of things are lovely. But, I don't have like paparazzi following me and I don't make any decisions based on, oh, that'll be uncomfortable for me because I'm famous or anything like that. So, it's like, in some ways you don't get to choose any of this stuff, but it is interesting as your own philosophy of success develops with maturity.
Mm. Let's look back for a moment then, which will help frame some of what we're going to talk about today. You headed to America in 1996. What were you looking for back then? And I guess, what did you find at the time?
Yeah, well, there were two elements. One was that I started making music in 1992. I was 14 at very indie level, right? And just the size of the population meant that to operate at an indie level in Australia meant success. If you could sell 1,000 copies of an album, that was like you'd made an impact, right? Without getting like a hit or anything like that. In America, that same niche, like that tiny sliver of a slice of the pie, meant I was selling 30 to 40,000 records in America and there was an audience and I could tour. So when I finished high school, I hadn't had a hit in Australia or anything, and I just viewed myself, okay, I was going to continue on as a niche indie artist. And it just seemed like there wasn't the population to do that in Australia. Like in Australia, the only way to succeed as a musician, if you want to exclusively do that, is to make hit music. Because that's even people who have hits often have second jobs or side hustles, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there was sort of the blue collar aspect of it where like I had an audience and there was work and I was happy to go chase that. But at a more fundamental level, there was a philosophical draw where, I grew up on the beats and, everything that was happening in America through my teenage years, through the 90s, like Lollapalooza and all that sort of like post-Nirvana stuff. To me, that was really a continuation of a philosophy that began in the 60s with like, and like Allen Ginsberg and the mixing of like, art and poetry and music and culture and politics. And like, it all seemed to be like a big melting pot of influences and countercultural forces and the prize of celebrity and glamour and excitement and New York City and clubs and, all of that. Like I always viewed sort of my intellectual and philosophical and spiritual interests and pursuits as not separate to nightlife and partying and socializing. And it all felt like that was the American dream that I bought into. So I was like, I wanted to experience it.
Did it meet the fantasy for you?
and beyond. Yeah. I mean, like, one of my first nights in LA when I'd really sort of moved when I was 18, I was making a record in Glendale. That was when my ex Claire, well, at the time, it was like our first date, Claire Danes, like picked me up and took me to Winona Ryder's house, and Dave Perner was there. And then next thing there was Fiona Apple and Lenny Kravitz. And like, I was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm 18. It's like I wanted to be near the hottest part of the flame, like where, I always related to that beat thing of like the mad ones. I wanted to be around the mad ones, and people that chase artistic expression and fame, and like we are all kind of mad in different ways. And I found myself right there. And for whatever reason, I was welcomed in, and I don't know, like the circus freak show accepted me. And I felt like, especially at that moment in my life, it was like where I belonged.
Mm. There's that energy that comes with that as well. I mean, I've enjoyed that freak show as well, where say I can't tell anybody outside of LA about this. It'll sound too stupid. But it impacts your work, I think, in a positive way, at least for a while before I think it can cross over into toxic if you're not careful. But that energy is incredibly inspiring in a way that a quieter life outside of it doesn't accomplish.
Well, it's something about you're around doers.
Mm,
You're around people that don't just have a dream, but go out and take the actions
mm,
to change their life and to make things happen. And some of those things are really good. Some of those things are really bad, and everything's on a spectrum in between.
mm,
But you're talking about people that take massive action.
mm,
And to me, that was the most exciting thing, and that's where it moves beyond medium and genre or anything like that, or what scene people are in, that when you look at the arts and you look at people who look at each other in the eye and go, oh, that is a person who is a soldier fighting their battle, and they are
mm.
never going to surrender. I mean, how fabulous. Those are the people that I relate to, in a sense. I also relate to, especially as I get older, I also find much more time in my heart and in my life for quieter people and people that are more observers, because you realize that the recklessness of constant action, like you said, it has its own dangers. But when you're young, that doesn't matter.
Well, so you just got home from a month on the road performing Awake is the New Sleep across Australia for its 20th anniversary. And I love this album when it was released, which is why I pitched it as a music feature to all of these editors. And that's actually how we met. You were performing in Detroit, I think at the Magic Stick.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sat out front and had a conversation for an
Was
hour.
that with
You were
like Maria Taylor? Was that tour and Hama Superstar? And was that that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I remember that. I remember that show.
Oh my
I
God.
particularly remember the sound check. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Good memory.
Yeah.
My memory isn't that
Yeah,
good,
no.
but you were my second in-person interview, and I feel like it was absolutely terrible. I think I completely failed you for the time that you had. But I had these vague memories of that interview, of you talking about how you were trying to put something positive into the universe, which I still think you did. Can you remind me about its emotional origins for you?
Well, that album, that came out of a time in my life where I went through this major breakup, and I'd always had this like interest in kind of like the occult or spirituality or whatever, like meditation, different stuff like that. And in some ways, there was sort of like, sometimes you're sort of trapped between worlds. Like it's a bit of a middle class kind of thing where like you want to like make your parents happy, and you are called, it might be by your sexuality, or it might be like by your lifestyle choices or interest in drugs or whatever it is. Like there are things that call you out of your tribe,
Mm,
out of your church. And for me, my interest in these sort of worlds and this like more experimental approach to like religion and spirituality and stuff, and wanting to be deeply experiential with it, because I went to a Jewish school growing up, and there's a lot of I guess you'd say like cultural observation, or observancy, or whatever, however you'd phrase it, of what religion means. Like, you just do the things you do because you go to your parents' house for dinner and then you see this and you know what I mean? Like, but it wasn't like mystical at all. But I had this like mystical impulse. And for me, the end of that relationship became this opportunity to like fully throw myself in, for better and worse, to these larger questions I had about how to live a life of meaning and what that really looked like. And it's funny because it sort of all came at once. Like, there was this like heartbreak and this massive opening into, like, I wouldn't say that the things I was exploring were like authentically me, because they were explorations, right? But the nature of the exploration was authentically me. The fact that I was like hell-bent, I had a B-side around that time called Hell-Bent for Heaven. And that was very much my impulse to knowing. Like, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know. Like, I remember growing up and, like I said, I went to a Jewish school, and I remember studying like Moses getting the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. The question I raised my hand, asked the rabbi, I was like, I don't want to read the story of this happening to someone else. If this kind of thing can happen, I want it to happen to me.
That's profound.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
people that have a mystical impulse. And that is also, there's people are like that with all kinds of things. People are like that with money. People are like that with travel. People are like that with sexuality. There are people for whom it's not enough to learn from a book. And I'm one of those people. I wanted to learn, by touching and tasting and being in life. So it was just this perfect moment. And, there was this interesting thing where I'd met this guru in India who I studied with for a few years. And he basically like sort of like gave me permission to be ambitious, but with a magnanimous agenda, which I think I'd never really allowed myself to have. I never allowed myself to think that, what if my success could be good for the world in some way? I'd always seen it as like, I think it was probably part of like my parents' politics. Like, they were quite like union oriented and like left wing sort of people. So we sort of looked at rich people and successful people like quite unconsciously, but they were a bit like cheaters. Do you know what I mean? Like if you'd been successful in the world, you probably were like not a great person, basically. And so this other shift that happened around the same time, like I thought, okay, well, here I am. I'm getting this guidance from this guru or whatever that means, but they're telling me go for it. And I've come to understand more that these people that position themselves as problem solvers are often highly intuitive and are basically telling you what you want/need to hear as a part of inserting themselves into your narrative about your own successful realization of yourself, So, but I did need to hear that. I did need to hear that. And I've heard it repeatedly from different people that are like, you are most attractive when you're dreaming big. Like, people say that to me, and coming from indie rock and coming from left-wing union parents, those were sort of hard things for me to square with what I saw as having integrity. So anyway, so all of that happened. So I was writing these songs that were steeped in both heartbreak and tremendous optimism and tremendous experimentalism in my life of feeling like, I don't know where this is going. Let's find out. Having the courage to do that, re-embracing a more organic indie rock, like sonically, like the architecture of that record was very the two records I'd made before had been more electronic influence, and there was a little bit of that on Awake, but it was more like I wrote all these songs on an acoustic guitar, and that went back to something like I remember like when Rick Rubin wanted Leonard Cohen to do a nylon string guitar album, and Leonard Cohen was like, I've done that, and Leonard's son Adam, I heard an interview with him, and he was saying Rick did perceive something about the architecture of that sound sonically was flattering to my dad at his essence, and I think there was something about that with me too. Like I can do stuff without a guitar in my hand, but there's something about it that is just like, whether it's like, I don't know, those questions of like what's real or what's authentic, it's real for my audience. Like they like me like that. So there's something about when I embrace that I'm just sort of like, it's like I heard once someone said, to be successful, it's not only what dream are you dreaming for yourself, but it's what dream are other people dreaming for you. And when you hit both of those things, the point they intersect, you'll have real success. When the dream you're dreaming aligns with the dream other people want for you, you're unstoppable.
We're going to come back to that later.
Sorry, I went all over the place.
Oh, no. We're going to come back because I think it overlaps with a couple questions about the balloon
Sure.
that I'm going to want to dig into a little bit more. But this is, I love the conversation so far. So I've listened, and I'm talking about the album in part because it frames to some degree my relationship with you, the last 20 years, but also you've just returned to it. And I've just been listening to it, and it's filled with so much yearning and hope. And it's so beautifully layered, the lyrics, because there's a flexibility to how to interpret them. Things that I don't know where you were 20 years ago, but we're all in this together. Some of this stuff, the resonance of it 20 years later almost hurts. And so I'm curious how you felt returning to it as an entirety, who you are today. What was that like? Did you discover anything about the album in the process?
I think one of the things that struck me most, re-practicing the songs and performing them and everything, is that it's a collection of songs that each song makes sense on its own as it is. Like I wasn't, they sort of all have slightly, as much as I wrote them all on guitar, it wasn't like I want to do 12 fast songs or I want to do 12 ballads. Like they're songs. And I think that is part of my strength. Like when I'm in that zone of just like, I'm going to write a bunch of songs and what they will be. And then I will produce them in a way that flatters them for what they are. That is my power kind of zone, as opposed to like working from an aesthetic conception or even a vibe conception, So that struck me. The other thing that struck me, and again, this connects with the balloon, is how deeply both metaphysical and horny it is. And I think that's why the artists I like, they have both those things, and they're not separate. The desire for transcendence, particularly the way sex and longing and all of that stuff is connected to sort of existential or spiritual transcendence. Like I've always loved that in art, because I love that in people. I love that in life. I don't think sex is dirty or embarrassing or that there's something wrong with it, essentially, which is kind of like, I mean, I think a lot of people would say that, but then when you actually dig into their actions and their feelings and perhaps the way they sabotage real connections, you realize that there are a lot of latent beliefs about sexuality that are quite dark. And I don't have that, or I'm sure I have that, because we all have everything, but it's not what I'm proud of or interested in, And yeah, and so when I was rereading The Balloon before, I mean, I don't know, are we interweaving this into this? Or?
We'll talk about that at the end if
Later.
that's okay.
Okay, at the end. But anyway, it's this short story by Donald Barthelme, and one of the things he says in it is that this artwork, this whatever this is, this mystery, sprung out of sexual frustration.
Mm.
And I sort of think all creativity is sexual frustration, like sex. And I mean, sex is the creative thing that we all do. It's the one creative thing you could say that we all do. Like even the way we eat, not everyone eats creatively, not everyone dresses creatively, but sex is an innately creative
Mm.
act, just the summoning of energies and then the expression of them. So anyway, that all that stuff really hit me coming back to the songs.
Mm. For me, and the beauty of art is, and we'll talk about this a bit more later as well, just the relationship of the viewer, the audience to the music, to the art as well. And it was quite startling because it evoked. I mean, I've listened to it since 2005. We also hear it every Christmas because Catch My Disease pops up in Just Friends, which I'm obsessed with.
Oh, okay.
So you've probably made $8.
Not Deuce Bigelow Part 2? No.
I didn't know it was on there, but it is it's 20 years, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a whole other person that I was, but also this energy that the album, it spoke to me so much. It was such a period of LA for me that I had just or was about to arrive there. Obama about to get elected. Like everything about the album has always resonated, with me as this very positive, hopeful thing. And listening to it today, like really sinking into it, it in some ways made me sad.
Hmm.
And that bittersweetness about, I'm now middle aged, but also sort of that optimism, both personally and globally, feels a little in decline. And so
Well,
it's
you
such a
know, sorry to interrupt you, but like the none of the optimism on that record is about the global order.
Mm,
It's about the deeper truths of connection, and I'm still optimistic of that. Like I don't know, I believe in life, and I find that like that essence that's in that record, there's a lot of naivety because when you're in your early 20s, just like what I'm saying now, another 20 years from now, I'm going to have more of a sense of the capacity of human suffering. I can
mm.
guarantee you.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, of
so,
course.
so obviously it was limited by that point, but still, it was about transcendent truths
Mm,
more than momentary truths. And for me, living through a period like this of such like global environmental, political uncertainty and all that, economic, it's none of that touches the world that record and those songs really speak of,
mm,
which is about what does it mean to live with an open heart in this world, despite the fact, like okay, so for me it was a breakup, right? So when I was 23, whatever, I went through a big breakup. At that time, that was pretty comparable to an American descent into fascism in terms of my emotional life, right? So like we were always talking about how do we live with an open heart? I mean, come on, baby, there's never been protection in all the history of human connection. I mean, that's the truth. You know what I
mm,
mean? You are going to suffer. This is like Buddhism.
mm.
So I get what you're saying in terms of it can highlight, wow, now I know more about how hard it is to stay open hearted.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a much better way to articulate it. And yeah, and the tension with others who or a culture that seems to be rejecting that connection at the moment. But as we know, these things tend to be temporary. Civilization's a bit of a roller coaster, which so why don't we get into to some of that and talking about the fall of America, which I cried at the first time I heard it, and again when I played it for my eldest son to try to help him understand, what I was going through because he's born in America, but he doesn't understand America at all. And so before we get into the song, maybe we should contextualize where you are in the world
Hmm.
at the moment because you're not in LA anymore. You're in Sydney, correct?
Yeah, I'm in Sydney. So I lived in the US for around 30 years, you know,
Mm.
30 and change. And yeah, we came out and spent a year here in the pandemic, and that I think planted the seeds. Like both the girls, my daughter and stepdaughter, really fell in love with it. And we went back for a few years, but then it just started feeling both, you know, it was very pragmatic too. Like with all what's happening in Hollywood, this is separate to the
Mm.
politics. There's just not as much work there. It's not the entertainment hub that it was. So a lot of what I think stabilized our lifestyle, like, you know, my wife's in TV and film, and it just felt like, and then you used to have to go do auditions in person, and
Mm.
all of that stuff meant you sort of had to be there. Increasingly, you know, my work has, I don't know, I'm more in demand in a way than I've ever been in Australia because I think probably I've also matured and been able to step into a role as, I don't know what you want to call it, like, you know, a pundit or whatever, but like a voice in culture. You know what
Mm.
I mean? So that's between
Mhm.
touring and just various things I get asked to do. There's like a lot of opportunity. So anyway, so yeah, we ended up in Australia, and then you know, we didn't go back for a year, and I have a green card, and so I was in breach of my green card, and I realized that I would even need to try and renew it by making a trip back on an expired green card, or I would have to like reapply or get that extra passport. And I was like, oh, I know that my voice on social media and all, like it's such a cursory Google that
Mm.
would lead you to go, no, if you were running a regime like Trump's was. Like, there's just no,
Mm.
I thought, and then if you get rejected, that's then sort of on your permanent record, and you always have to say in future, I was rejected for a visa. And I just thought that is going to cause me problems in a decade. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Because you have to explain also. I just thought, you know what? I'm going to give up my green card. I'm married to an American. If this whole thing passes at a certain point and we want to live there again, I can reapply for it. Or, you know, we'll see what happens. But anyway, it was a very emotional process for me because, like I said, my connection to America and my identity as an artist who went to America because I wanted to experience the pursuit of madness and the pursuit of
Mm.
my dream in an American way. I was very, very attached to it. But I also, and I think rehearsing the Awake as You Sleep stuff, it just reminded me, oh, every one of these songs, I just trusted that if I wanted to write a song about it because it was happening to me, that was enough.
Mm.
And what have I been doing? I've been doing what we're all doing. I'm sitting on TikTok and I'm watching, you know, Aaron Parnas major news updates. And it just struck me that this experience I was having of watching, I would say to my daughter, like probably like what you were saying to your son, your kids are going to ask you about this, what it was like. This is
Mm.
pay attention. Like you are living through something that does not happen every day. This is the fall of sort of the greatest empire currently on the planet, and it's a shift in global power. So this is very, very provocative. And I also thought of how I was so wrong about America in a lot of ways. My Lollapalooza fantasy of America as this cultural melting pot was a coastal fantasy. And I didn't realize that until it took decades for me
Mm.
to realize not that there's no validity in it or there aren't a certain amount of people who believe in it. As of this moment, there's not enough people who believe in it to keep it moving in that direction.
Mm.
So, so there was sort of like a idealism, like a death of idealism. And I just wanted to kind of write a song that was acknowledging what was happening,
Mm.
but also a tribute to, like I said, this ties back to the hope of connection, the transcendent part in Awake is the New Sleep, that I said, even though the world is the way it is now, the desire to live with an open heart remains. It's like that doesn't change. And I wanted in Fall of America, I wanted to say the part of me that saw Lollapalooza and went, yes, that lives on.
Mm.
And I wanted to write a song that was addressed both of those sides.
So before we keep talking, I want listeners to check out the song first. So for those of you listening, wherever you are, this is Ben Lee performing The Fall of America. If you want to follow along with the lyrics, you can find them in the show notes.
I'm glued to my phone watching the fall of America. One last call for alcohol. It's coming to an end. And to all of my friends, well, I am not forgetting you. When this whole thing is over, we will dance again. Disneyland, Spike Lee, Kurt Cobain and Lou Reed, Patti Smith, Muhammad Ali, I still hear them speak to me. Poets with a conscience, insecure and confident. They had what I wanted, what would happen if I got it? Perry Farrell, culture breakers, Basquiat, the contemplators, freedom fighters, belly achers, all the movers and the shakers, circling the wagon, screaming round Manhattan, parties in the canyon. It's so strange to watch it happen. Now I'm glued to my phone watching the fall of America. One last call for alcohol. It's coming to an end. And to all of my friends, well, I am not forgetting you. When this whole thing is over, we will dance again. Amphetamines and Mary Jane, Iggy Pop and John Coltrane, breaking hearts and bending brains, put it straight into my veins. REM, LSD and WA ecstasy, read it all in magazines. I'm leaving home, please pray for me. Ramblers and drifters, raconteurs and grifters, depressives and uplifters, shapeshifters, shoplifters. It starts to feel naive, yeah, that I ever believed, yeah. Heart upon my sleeve, yeah, but that was just a dream, yeah. Teenage lust, Paul Westerberg, rock and roll will have you heard. Tina Turner, she survived. She always kept the flame alive. Andy Warhol, I adore you. I've been shaken to my core. What was all that dreaming for? I loved you more, I loved you more. I'm glued to my phone watching the fall of America. One last call for alcohol. It's coming to an end. And to all of my friends, well, I am not forgetting you. When this whole thing is over, we will dance, we will dance, we will dance. We will dance.
So, stunning song. I'm curious, how difficult was it to write for you, both on a craft level, but I think also personally? I'm a screenwriter. Writing difficult things can sometimes mess me up for days, weeks sometimes. Did it just pour out? Is it something that you worked on for weeks, tearing apart and reassembling?
I think because of the specifics of my situation as being someone that had a green card and is now living outside America, there was this question of, do I want to go there? Because we're essentially, with songs like these or anything you do, we're all leaving digital trails behind us. And, you've seen this week all the surveillance stuff coming out with ICE and all that. So I really grappled with that internally, just not particularly about this song, just about how open do I want to be about my feelings. How much of a digital footprint do I want to leave? And I did the thing you have to do as an artist, which is I gave myself permission to make something and never release it. I said, you know what? I have to make it. Let me do it. I'm under no obligation. I'm not telling anyone I'm doing it. And I had the title at that point, you know. And then I remember we were in Bangkok having a holiday, getting a suit made for my tour, and the chorus kind of came to me, and I was nervous about it.
Hmm.
But I
Is
also,
that nervous? They always tell you want to be afraid
yeah,
of what you're doing. Is that what you're describing?
I think so. I mean, I think you recognize enough. It's more like a compulsion, and it's scary because you don't know where you're going. So yeah, I sat with it. I had the chorus. I sang it into a voice note. I was really excited about it. I was like, I want to write this song. I'm going to give myself permission to write this song. And I got back and I was sort of jet lagged and I tried writing the verses and I just didn't like it. It wasn't flowing. And so I put it down.
Mhm.
And a lot of what I've learned as far as writing has been you keep reapproaching the canvas, but you also just, it's okay to walk away.
Hmm.
Like the main thing you have to do is be willing to do the work. As long as you're willing to do the work, then you can become an instrument at the appropriate moment. If you resist actually even picking up the pen, you're in trouble because you're closing the door on any magic happening. And I just waited and I thought, you know what? Maybe that was, again, I released it. I was like, I give myself permission to let that idea go. Maybe that was something I had to go through. Because, you know, you never know. Like with writing, like sometimes things are just exercises. And I thought that was an exercise. And then one day I was like, oh, I'm ready. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I think I thought of Disneyland, Spike Lee, Kurt Cobain, Lou Reed. And I was like, oh, those four things, they encompass so much of what I want to say.
Hmm.
And I just did it. And I wrote it pretty quickly. And then like it was like a day or something. And then again, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I I kept it within my family. And my mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law were in Australia, and Ione's little brother. And I played it for them one night, and they got very emotional, and they were like, "What an amazing song!" And Ione, everyone was like, "Yeah, you're going to release it." And I kind of felt like, again, I don't want to be grandiose, but you never know in a digital culture, things can take on a life of their own, you
Hmm.
know? And I like, yes, may we all be cursed with the problem of virality because it means like your career's going well or whatever. But I was like, if I kind of I need my family on board with this because
Hmm.
I am potentially pouring a little bit of gasoline on a situation that could come back to haunt me.
Absolutely.
And I think we're going to see more of that, more of people's things coming back to haunt them, in the coming couple of years. So, but I felt my family, and I said I'm nervous about it, and we just, just casually talked through it. But I just felt their support, and all in all, I just felt my family being like, "You wrote a beautiful song,"
Hmm.
you know, and that's why I love being in a family of artists because at the end of the day, that's enough. But in terms of how this song could get out there. I know it has touched people quite a lot. Like I've had a handful of interactions like this one where some people just felt like the song has something, it spoke to them in a way. So I feel like part of my just integrity as an artist means like, okay, I have to give it a shot.
I don't know if I experience nearly enough art that helps me articulate things that I'm going through at the moment, and you're looking for that. For me, that's what art often is, like help us form some sort of language, some sort of, common mythology. And what's happening feels very absent from pop culture. I mean, it's in books, but books don't have the same power that they used to. Songs do, and movies do. And I think that's what happened listening to the song, but also like listening to you talk. The fear of America, the fear of I'm half American. I was born there. They can't take away my passport, but I am genuinely afraid of traveling to the country because of things that I put online, and to not have that
Yeah.
passport. I absolutely understand it. I'm listening to you thinking this is what I keep telling my wife, and this is reality in 2025.
Yeah, well, one of the things too I realized with where I stand with writing a song like this is if you're living in America right now and trying to work and trying to get a label, like you are not heavily incentivized to, unless you go all out, like that Macklemore song or something like that. But in general, speaking up politically is it can only cause you problems, you
Mhm.
know. So and it can only cause a label problems in their distribution, and so I just suddenly thought that wow. Yeah, I agree. I was like, why aren't there more songs talking
Mm.
about what's happening? Like, it's really weird. Like, I feel like there are songs that capture the spirit of what's happening, but it's almost like you can't hit it too on the nose. And I thought, well, that is sort of the privilege of where I'm standing now. I thought I should do this.
I love the fact that you went to the US to find yourself as an artist and came back to Australia so you could write a song that I feel like is one of the most honest I've heard about the state of America today. That self-exiling yourself in a way to speak actual truth others can't at the moment.
Well, I appreciate that. And I also feel that that is part of just the nature of
Mm,
things. Like, I've done a lot of work increasingly over the years, like as a champion of Australian music,
mm.
one who chose not to live in Australia for 30 years. So, I had my first hit in Australia when I left. There is something about that creates a charge,
Mm.
that you can use for different things.
So I have a couple more questions on this side of the interview. I'm curious how you feel about the American dream today. You mentioned that it felt like a coastal dream. Is it just history's greatest marketing scheme?
It's weird because I don't know, like when I think about enlightenment as a concept,
Mm,
right, in spirituality, there was a great movie that came out a decade or two ago called Samsara. That was,
mm,
I think that's what it was called. It was about the Buddha becoming enlightened, but how he left his wife behind.
mm,
And it was about like what happened to her and how she's not, okay, great. So you sat under a tree and became enlightened, but like what happened there? And I've had a lot of interest in this area. Like, there's a book called Off the Road by Carolyn Cassidy, who's Neil Cassidy's wife. Who was like the main
mm,
character in
mm,
On the Road. And she talks about while these men were off chasing enlightenment, the women were like raising these children by themselves with like waiting for money to be sent home in an envelope from like
mm,
while these guys were out with like in like brothels in Utah, wherever they were, and and so I think enlightenment is a lot like the American dream. It's like it's an ideal, yet the pursuit of it as a pragmatic thing is dangerous. It's like that's actually how gurus take hold of people in cults with the
mm.
promise of the keys to a kingdom. And so, do you say the kingdom itself must not exist if it's able to be used as a tool of manipulation? I wonder. I don't know obviously I don't know the answer to that.
Mm.
But where I stand now is, say, with like enlightenment and spirituality, is I essentially believe there is no path. But that doesn't mean there's no destination.
Mm,
I heard the guy who was the showrunner of Modern Family, I forget the guy's name, but I heard him on
mm,
KCRW once, and he said something I never forget, which is success in show business is hacking through the jungle with a machete, and every step forward you take, it closes behind you so nobody can follow you. And I think spirituality is the same.
mm,
I think there is no path there the two people can take. It is a fight for your life. And there's a lot of Buddhist texts and stuff where, you know, these allegories where like the student says, I want enlightenment. And the master pushes his head into the lake and basically almost drowns him. And he comes up, he's just like, like gasping for air. And the master says, when you want enlightenment as badly as you wanted air, right then you'll get it. And I think that's got a truth to it in that it's actually it's like a primal need for truth and revelation is sort of what brings it into our life. Like we've all been there where you're like on your knees, where the bank account's low, where you're like, no one understands. You're like, I literally cannot do this, right? And then lo and behold, there's a crack. There's like, it can be the littlest thing, but there's a crack and you suddenly get enough faith or hope to continue. And none of this has to do with there needing to be an interventionist God or anything like that, but just that life as a forward momentum finds a way to continue against all odds. So I kind of like, I more increasingly put the American dream into that category of the qualities that I saw and that I believed in. I think they are beautiful aspirational qualities. But the sales pitch that was shaped around it, the commercialization, the politicization, all of that stuff is like where the smoke and mirrors are.
I struggle with it. Like you know, I just don't understand anymore how it's a positive thing to tell people they can be anything. I don't think you're supposed to be anything in the universe. It's I'm going to cut this, but it is.
No, I get this and I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah.
Every person I know in the US who lives that life of resentment is because they were promised something that was never achievable. They were never going to have it. I think of my grandfather who died. He owned his house, had a holiday house, retired a carpenter. And my father had 3 retirements, retired 10 years later than my grandfather, and resented the world because he didn't have what his father had. And everything was measured by what you didn't accomplish, that somehow the dream guaranteed you. And inevitably you look for your scapegoats. And it's a very toxic thing, but I don't know what the alternative is. Because
But you said something really important, which is, the mistake is that you think it's guaranteed or that it's sold that it's guaranteed. If you think of it more like a plant growing towards the light, the plant never touches the light. It's not going to get to the sun. But we're talking about a direction. We're talking about momentum. The momentum encouraged by dreaming big is absolutely crucial to achieve anything. Like if you give up on that, you're going to be depressed. You have to believe that it's possible to have, to do, to be more than that. The flip side is, and this is the side that Americans are, it's like karmically they have to learn, is that there's 2 sides. Like there's a punk band from Brisbane who I love. They're not around anymore, called The Greats. And they had a song and the chorus was, I'm 2 kinds of right. I surrender and I fight. And I thought, that's it. It's, you have to, I mean, you know, we're coming into like the serenity prayer, the things I cannot change and accepting the things I can. Like without the second part, you're delusional, right? Like if all you're doing is thinking you can change everything and change your existence and you are guaranteed to be successful and your band will become the next Oasis and, you know, whatever it is, like that's where you're in for a world of hurt, whether you get it or not. But when you realize that like it's more like fuel. It's fuel that you got to get up in the morning. It's like health. It's never perfect. But should you not work out? Like you work out so that the machine runs well. You know what I mean? Like you eat so the machine runs well, but you also accept you're going to die and you're going to get sick. So I kind of look at it as like this thing where you gotta, if we're going to be healthy and if America's going to be healthy, it's got to accept both realities.
Obviously, we don't know how to crack helping America accept both realities, but I do think I've always thought art, that was the job of art, is to help us understand a world far more complicated. I mean, some people look to religion for that, to spirituality, but so often religion is a black white scenario. It's a direct path in some way. Nuance, grayness, these things are not present in a lot of the Western religions, at least. And so art, I thought, was to help us understand and discuss these things. And it's incredibly problematic when you watch Hollywood's output sort of diminish, that artists in general are afraid to communicate complicated things because, unlike the 60s, now there's genuine fear. You're afraid of saying something because it might not even allow you into the country. And same with books. I'm a novelist, and I get such pushback when I want to talk about subjects that are difficult like this, and that I'm concerned. Who are the instructors if culture is diminished to such a point that even the artists are now a point of ridicule for 50% plus of the country?
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about that too, but I also think art as an instruction, like we're also speaking about our lens on it.
Mm,
And I think it's like, it can be a lot of things. And I think that's, we're coming to the balloon. That's what that's about. That like, who actually knows what it is? It can be a tool of manipulation. It can be, I love in the balloon how he says some people felt comforted by it and some felt oppressed by it. That we don't know what it is. We know that my daughter was learning in history that storytelling is the defining characteristic of our species, and that essentially everything we've created, from architecture to tools, whatever, it has to do with stories we can tell about what our purpose is, I love that idea.
absolutely.
Meaningful. And politics is a story. We are continuing to tell our story. Sometimes it's a horror story, but it's no less artistic. It's a very dark story.
Well, so I love that. All right, so we'll be back in a moment for the bonus episode because we'll get to talk about the balloon, which I'm really excited about. But thank you for the conversation so far.
Cheers, man.
As for you out there listening today, thanks for joining me for some 5 a.m. Story Talk. Don't run just yet. There's a bonus episode with Ben Lee coming your way, which I'll tell you more about in just a second. First, what did you make of the conversation with Ben? If you have any questions or thoughts about the discussion, drop them in the comments on this episode's posts at the 5 a.m. Story Talk newsletter at Substack or the 5 a.m. Story Talk podcast at Instagram. You can find links to both in the show notes, along with links to Ben's music, The Fall of America, in case you want to listen to it again, and information about his upcoming Cross-Australia tour that's going to run from January to May of next year. Now, as for that bonus episode, Ben returns to discuss a foundational artwork from his life, the 1966 short story, The Balloon by Donald Barthelme. Barthelme was a celebrated postmodern fiction writer, and I think this piece of magical realism from him is one of his best. It's a first-person accounting, I guess you'd say, of the appearance of a massive, irregularly shaped balloon over New York City that stretches from 14th Street to Central Park. What is it? What does it mean? I like to talk about the role of the audience or the viewer in a piece of art, how we're a participant in the story and thus a kind of co-author of its meaning. This is why we say art is subjective, I think. Well, The Balloon is the epitome of this. It's only 6 pages long, a masterpiece really, so check it out at the link in the show notes and then come back to hear Ben talk about why it means so much to him as an artist. The best way to listen to this bonus episode is at Apple or the 5 a.m. Story Talk newsletter. Again, links in the show notes. I've only got 2 more guests this season, but I've saved the most fun ones for last, in part because each is going to have something to say about the holiday season in particular. Schmigadoon creator and showrunner Cinco Paul is going to talk about It's a Wonderful Life in his bonus episode. The other is my friend actress Erin Cahill, who'll be on your screens this holiday season, once again at the Hallmark Channel, with the film Christmas at the Catnip Cafe. Holy alliteration, Batman. We're going to try to work out together what these holiday films mean to our culture. Remember, every one of my guests have something to say about our world and the stories we tell, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out. See you soon, Story Talkers.